The wind howled, carrying with it the faint scent of sulfur. In the distance, the jagged peaks of the alien mountain range loomed like the teeth of a forgotten beast. The sun, a cold, red orb hanging low in the sky, cast long, sharp shadows across the barren landscape. The planet's surface felt alive, restless, as if it were watching, waiting. Xander stood at the edge of the cliff, his boots scraping against the loose gravel. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon, but there was nothing to see. No sign of life. Nothing but silence and the crackling of his team's equipment behind him. He adjusted the pulse rifle slung across his back, flexing his fingers around the hilt of his knife. "What's the delay, Commander?" a voice interrupted the stillness. Rav, one of his youngest mercenaries, jogged up beside him, his face taut with nervous energy. "Patience," Xander muttered, his voice like gravel. "The human we're after is no ordinary target." Rav's eyes flickered with doubt, but he didn't argue. The mercenaries had been hired by the alien lords, those cold, calculating rulers of the galaxy. Their mission was simple: find the human, Eli Kane, and eliminate him. Easy money, or so they were told. What the alien lords hadn't mentioned was why Eli was so important. Or why they were sending a team of elite mercenaries to handle a single human. "I've heard stories," Rav continued, his voice a mix of curiosity and disbelief, about humans being different. "But why all the secrecy?" Xander's gaze hardened. "We're not paid to ask questions, Rav. We're paid to kill." But even as he spoke, doubts began to creep into his mind. The alien lords were ruthless, and their decisions were often precise. But this mission was far too strange. There was something off about it. A faint crackle of static from his comms broke through his thoughts. "Xander, come in," a voice rang out through his earpiece. "Go ahead," Xander replied, his tone crisp. "Scanners picking up an anomaly," the voice continued. "We've located the human's last known coordinates. But there's a disturbance. The terrain ahead is unstable. We recommend proceeding with caution." Xander's jaw tightened. They hadn't expected any interference from the environment. It was supposed to be a simple retrieval. "We move out," he ordered, turning away from the cliff's edge and leading his team forward. The rocky path before them was treacherous, but they were mercenaries. This was what they did: navigate hostile terrain, eliminate targets. As they trekked through the rugged landscape, the air grew thick with tension. The wind had picked up, gusting in sharp bursts that whipped at their faces. The horizon blurred with dust, and an oppressive silence settled over them. There was something about this place that felt wrong, as though the planet itself was watching them, waiting. Xander scanned the horizon, his mind racing. Eli Kane had been stranded here months ago, after his ship was sabotaged. The alien lords had provided the coordinates, no explanation, no details. Just a simple instruction: kill. The terrain began to shift, the flat rocks giving way to a dense, twisting forest of alien trees. Their twisted, gnarled roots seemed to reach up from the ground like skeletal hands, and their leaves shimmered with an unnatural, almost metallic glow. A faint hum filled the air, like the low buzz of electricity. Xander motioned for his team to halt. "This doesn't feel right," Rav said, his voice barely a whisper. "You're imagining things," Xander snapped, though even he couldn't ignore the unsettling sense of unease that clung to the air like a second skin. They pushed forward, deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees were unnaturally tall, their trunks thick and covered in what appeared to be patches of glowing moss. It was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of boots against the alien soil. "Eyes open," Xander muttered. "We're getting close." Suddenly, there was a sound, a rustle in the trees, followed by a faint, guttural growl. Xander's hand shot to his rifle, but before he could react, something large and fast streaked through the underbrush, vanishing into the shadows. The growl lingered in the air like a warning. "Did you see that?" Rav asked, his voice tense. "Stay sharp," Xander ordered. "It's probably wildlife. Stay close." They moved forward, but the hairs on the back of Xander's neck stood on end. The air seemed to thicken, the shadows stretching unnaturally long. His senses were on high alert, every muscle in his body tensed for a fight. He could feel something watching them, waiting. But what? "Commander," a voice came through his comms. It was Tess, one of the sharpshooters. "I found something. There's a marker of some kind. Human-made." Xander felt a surge of urgency. "Where?" "About 50 meters to the northwest," Tess replied. "It's a broken transmitter. Looks like it's been here a while." "Move out," Xander commanded, and the team shifted directions. The marker was unmistakable, a damaged piece of equipment, half buried in the soil. It was human, though barely recognizable. The dust of months had settled on its surface, but the faint glow of a distress signal still blinked weakly from within. Xander knelt beside it, his fingers brushing over the cracked screen. "This is where he was," Tess murmured. "He was here. But, where is he now?" Before Xander could respond, a scream echoed through the trees, sharp, blood-curdling. It was followed by a sickening crash. "Ambush!" Xander shouted, spinning toward the sound. But it was too late. One of his men, Yarrick, collapsed to the ground, his chest torn open by an invisible force. The team fell into chaos as the ground beneath them shifted, the once stable forest becoming a maze of shifting rocks and dangerous terrain. Xander's heart raced as his team scrambled to defend themselves. But there was something else, a shadow moving in the distance, something human, yet not. The hunt had begun. The silence after Jarrek's scream hung in the air, suffocating. Xander's heart pounded as he scanned the chaotic scene, his grip tightening on his rifle. His team was scrambling, disoriented by the sudden attack. Jarrek's body lay motionless, his blood mixing with the dirt, and the unrelenting growl that echoed through the trees sent a chill down Xander's spine. "Get to cover!" Xander barked, his voice cutting through the panic. His command was instinctive, honed by years of mercenary work, but this was different. The enemy wasn't just another bounty. This wasn't a routine mission. Rav, his wide eyes filled with terror, ducked behind a jagged boulder, his weapon shaking in his hand. Xander didn't have time to comfort him. Instead, he turned his focus to the shadows creeping between the trees. The ground beneath them was shifting, the forest alive with movement. The earth trembled slightly as something unseen, yet immense, moved within the dense underbrush. Xander's breath was shallow, his senses heightened. The planet was alive, pulsing with a strange, unearthly energy. But this wasn't nature's hand. This was a predator. From the corner of his eye, Xander saw Tess, her sharp eyes already scanning the surroundings with precision. She was methodical, calculating, even in the heat of the moment. Xander locked eyes with her for a split second, and she gave a small nod, signaling she was in control. He turned back to the team. "We're not alone. Stay together. We'll find him. Eli Kane." The name had been whispered by every intelligence officer, every contact, but none had ever been able to explain why the alien lords wanted him dead. He was no simple scientist. There was something more. And whatever it was, it had already started to show itself. Xander's comms crackled to life. It was Tess. "We need to move. Now. This thing isn't just after us. It's drawing us in." The hairs on the back of Xander's neck stood up. "What do you mean drawing us in?" "I'm not sure yet. But whatever's out there," Tess's voice faltered for a moment, as if the very air around her was thickening. "It's using the terrain. It's like the whole planet's reacting to us." Xander clenched his fists. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a trap. And they were walking right into it. A low rumble echoed across the landscape, and a flicker of movement at the edge of Xander's vision caught his attention. He barely had time to react before a massive shadow lunged at them. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't anything Xander had ever seen. The creature, if that's what it could be called, was a distortion. A shape that flickered between the natural world and something else entirely. Its form was jagged, shifting like the very air around it, bending light and space as it moved. It wasn't solid. Not completely. Xander's instincts kicked in. He pulled the trigger. The blast from his pulse rifle struck the creature's side, but it passed through it like water through a sieve. The creature didn't flinch. It didn't react at all. "Keep shooting," Xander shouted. His team obeyed, but nothing worked. The creature wasn't just dodging their shots. It was warping around them, moving faster than the eye could follow. Rav let out a panicked yell as a massive tendril lashed out, narrowly missing him by inches. The air hummed with energy, a palpable tension radiating from the creature's form. "We need to retreat," Tess shouted from the rear, her rifle aimed but her hands trembling. "This thing is beyond us." "Not yet," Xander snapped. He could feel it now. Eli was close. He had to be. This thing, whatever it was trying to keep them from their target. He grabbed Rav by the shoulder, pulling him toward cover. "Get your head together, Rav. We need to move fast." No hesitation. But Rav's eyes were wide with fear, his body shaking as he tried to reload his weapon. "It's not just a creature, is it?" he stammered. "This place, it's like it's alive." "It's—" "I know," Xander interrupted, his voice low and tense. "And it's not just about Eli anymore. We're dealing with something much bigger." There was a long, drawn-out silence. The creature, if it could be called that, seemed to pause, as if assessing them. For a brief moment, everything went still. The tension in the air felt unbearable, like the calm before a storm. Then, without warning, a massive roar shattered the silence. The creature surged forward again, its tendrils slicing through the air like whips. Xander's team scattered, but the creature was faster. It reached out, its form distorting into a blur as it attempted to envelop them. Xander dove for cover, just narrowly avoiding the creature's strike. His pulse rifle had been knocked from his grip, but he still had his knife. He wasn't going down without a fight. "Tess! Rav!" Xander shouted, his voice fierce. "We need to stick together. We'll make it out of this if we don't lose focus." Tess was the first to respond. "Cover me. I'm going to make a run for the rocks. We'll need a vantage point to see where it's coming from." Xander didn't hesitate. "Go!" Tess sprinted, her movements swift and precise. As she moved, Xander caught a glimpse of her face. Her determination was unwavering, even as the creature circled, hunting. "Move!" Xander yelled again, pushing Rav forward. But the young mercenary was frozen in place, his wide eyes locked on the swirling mass of shadows before them. With a sharp tug, Xander pulled Rav to his feet and shoved him toward the rocks. The creature let out another deafening screech, the air warping around its form. And then it stopped. For a brief, terrifying moment, Xander realized that it wasn't just the creature that was watching them. The planet itself was watching. Xander's pulse raced. They weren't just hunting Eli anymore. They were hunting them all. The ground shook again. But this time, it was different. Something was coming. Something bigger than the creature. "Get ready," Xander muttered under his breath. "We're not leaving this planet until we know the truth." The ground trembled beneath Xander's boots, a deep, rumbling pulse that reverberated through his body. Every fiber of his being screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. Not anymore. The creature, whatever it was, had backed them into a corner. And the air, charged with an almost palpable energy, was thick with the smell of ozone and fear. Xander's breath was shallow, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He scanned the horizon, his mind racing. The battle had shifted from an ambush to a full-blown hunt, and it wasn't just the creature that was hunting them. They were being drawn into something far larger, something more dangerous than they could have ever anticipated. "Commander." Tessa's voice cut through the tension, sharp and urgent. "It's coming." Xander didn't need to ask what she meant. The creature was advancing, its form flickering in and out of view, a blur of shadows and distorted light. It moved faster than the eye could follow, circling them like a predator toying with its prey. "We can't outrun it," Rav gasped, his voice tinged with panic. He was huddled behind a rocky outcrop, clutching his pulse rifle as if it would do any good. "We don't have to outrun it," Xander said, his voice calm but steady. "We just need to survive long enough to find out what's really going on here." Tess, crouched behind a jagged stone formation, took aim at the creature, her rifle steady in her hands. "We need to take this thing down. Now. Before it kills us all." Xander nodded, his mind working in overdrive. There was no clear plan, no escape. Just the primal need to survive. "We stick together. No one breaks formation. If we go down fighting." The creature let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that seemed to echo in their bones. It was no longer hiding, no longer playing. It was closing in, its jagged form shifting with unnatural speed. The air shimmered around it, warping and bending in ways that defied logic. "Move!" Xander shouted, pulling Rav to his feet and pushing him toward the cover of a nearby rock. "Tess, keep your eyes on it. Don't let it get too close." But Tess was already moving, her sharp eyes locked on the creature's every movement. She fired a precise shot, but it was like shooting at a ghost. The blast passed through the creature without so much as a flinch, as if it didn't even exist in this reality. The creature struck without warning, its tendrils shooting out like lightning. Tess barely had time to react before one of the tendrils lashed out, knocking her rifle from her hands and sending her sprawling to the ground. "Tess!" Xander yelled, but there was no time to reach her. The creature was relentless, its form twisting and turning in ways that made it impossible to predict. It was like fighting against an impossible force of nature, something that existed outside the realm of comprehension. Xander turned his attention to Rav. The young mercenary's face was pale, his grip on his rifle unsteady. He was frozen in place, his eyes wide with fear. "Rav, focus!" Xander snapped. "This is no time to freeze up. We fight or we die. It's that simple." Rav's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he nodded, tightening his grip on his weapon. I'm ready." They didn't have much time. The creature was closing in, its eerie, shifting form looming ever closer. Xander's heart raced, but he forced himself to think clearly. They needed a plan, something to level the playing field. "Head for the ridge," Xander ordered. "We'll have the high ground. If we can make it there, we might have a chance." Rav nodded, but before they could move, a voice, soft, but unmistakable, echoed through the comms. "Xander, it's Eli." The words stopped Xander dead in his tracks. He froze, his pulse racing. Eli? The human they'd been sent to kill. But how? How could he be here? What the hell? Xander muttered under his breath. "Eli? Where are you?" There was a brief pause before Eli's voice crackled back through the comms. "I'm not your enemy. Not anymore." Xander's eyes narrowed. He didn't know if this was some kind of trick, but there was something in Eli's tone that sounded genuine. Desperate, even. But why was he speaking to them now? Why reveal himself at this moment? "The creature," Eli continued, "it's not from this planet. It's a weapon, created to guard me. You need to understand, Xander, there's more going on here than you realize." Xander's mind raced. A weapon? Guarding Eli? His thoughts scrambled, trying to make sense of the situation. He glanced at Rav, then at Tess, who had finally regained her footing, though she still looked dazed. "Is this some kind of trap?" Xander growled into the comms. "Tell me what's really happening, Eli. Why the hell were we sent to kill you?" Eli's voice was steady, almost sorrowful. "Because I'm not just a scientist. I'm the key to something much larger. And the alien lords," he paused. "They've known about me for years. They're the ones who created the creature. I was supposed to be eliminated before I could learn the truth." A cold shiver ran down Xander's spine. The alien lords. They were the ones who had sent him on this mission, who had ordered Eli's death. But why? What was so dangerous about this one human? "I need you to trust me," Eli said, urgency creeping into his voice. "Get to the center of the forest. There's a structure hidden there. It's where everything started. It's the only way you'll understand what's going on." Xander didn't know if he could trust Eli. Hell, he barely understood what was happening. But the creature was getting closer, and there was no time to waste. Whatever Eli was saying, it was their only chance. "All right, we're moving," Xander said, his voice steely. "But this better not be a trick, Eli. If you're lying—" "I'm not lying," Eli interrupted, his voice sharp. "I never was." Xander gave Rav one last glance, his decision made. "We move now. Stay close." They began running, the creature hot on their heels, but Xander's mind was elsewhere. Eli's words echoed in his head, and with each passing second, the mystery deepened. The hunt was no longer just about survival. It was about uncovering the truth, and facing the unimaginable consequences of what they would find. Xander's boots thudded against the uneven ground as he led his team through the dense forest. The air had grown thick, the stench of something unfamiliar seeping into their lungs with every breath. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the physical exertion, but from the nagging feeling that the moment they set foot in the center of the forest, everything would change. Tess was ahead, her sharp eyes scanning every shadow, every movement between the trees. She was always the first to react, but even now, her movements were deliberate, cautious. Her hand gripped her sidearm tightly, and she couldn't suppress the tremor in her fingers. Whatever this planet was doing to them, it was affecting her too. Rav, once the wide-eyed rookie, had hardened in the face of this impossible task. His face was drawn, but his movements were no longer as hesitant. He had seen his comrades fall. The terror that had once gripped him was fading, replaced by cold determination. But even as his body obeyed his commands, his mind raced. He couldn't shake the growing realization that they were not just dealing with an enemy, but with something far bigger. "There," Xander said, his voice low, as he pointed toward the massive stone structure partially obscured by vines and thick foliage. It was like a dark monument, ancient and foreboding, its surface weathered by centuries, perhaps millennia, of neglect. "Is that?" Tess began, her voice trailing off as she studied the structure. "That's our destination," Xander confirmed, his gaze steady. He could feel it now, the weight of something ancient pressing down on him, as though the very stones of the structure were watching them. The creature that had been hunting them all this time seemed to have disappeared, but Xander knew better than to believe it had given up. This planet, this damned place, wasn't like any other world they had encountered. It had a presence, a pulse, as though it were alive, and the creature was just one manifestation of its strange energy. They moved forward in silence, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and something metallic. Xander's instincts told him that time was running out. If Eli's warning had been true, they needed to uncover what lay hidden in that structure before it was too late. As they neared the entrance, Xander's mind raced. Eli's voice had been crackling through their comms for the past hour, urging them on, but the more he heard, the more confused he became. Eli had said that he wasn't the target anymore, that something larger was at play. But what could it be? What could a single human do that would cause such chaos in the galaxy? "Tess," Xander said, breaking the silence. "What do you think?" Tess's eyes were fixed on the structure, her brow furrowed. "It's a weapon," she said, almost to herself. "It has to be. The way the energy feels, the way the creature reacted, it's like we've stumbled into the heart of a war zone." Xander nodded. It wasn't just the creature they were up against now, it was the entire force behind it. The alien lords had been orchestrating something, and Eli, whether he realized it or not, was right at the center of it. Rav glanced at the structure nervously. "What if we're walking into a trap?" Xander didn't hesitate. "If we don't go in, we'll never know the truth." The entrance loomed before them, a massive archway carved from the stone itself, almost alien in design. The moment they stepped through, a rush of cold air washed over them. It was like entering another world, a place untouched by time. The walls were lined with carvings, symbols that none of them recognized. They were mesmerizing, shifting slightly, as if alive, though that might have been the low pulse of energy vibrating beneath their feet. Xander felt his skin prickle. There was something inside this structure, something ancient and powerful. He could feel it in the air, in the way the ground seemed to hum beneath his feet. "Keep moving," Xander ordered, his voice steady, but even he could feel the tension building in his chest. As they advanced, the walls seemed to close in around them, the path narrowing as the stone ceiling rose higher. They passed through narrow corridors, their shadows stretching like monstrous hands in the dim light. There was a low, rhythmic sound that vibrated through the stone, like the beating of a heart. Rav's voice broke the silence. "This place, it feels wrong." Xander glanced back at him. "Stay close. Whatever happens, don't break formation." Suddenly, the path opened into a massive chamber, so vast it felt like it could swallow them whole. In the center of the room stood a massive pedestal, and atop it, a strange device. It was a blend of organic and mechanical, a structure that seemed to pulse with its own life, its surface rippling like water. "This is it," Xander whispered, though he barely recognized his own voice. It was as if the device itself was calling to him, reaching into his mind. Tess stepped forward, cautious but drawn to the pedestal. Her eyes were wide, scanning the intricate carvings that surrounded the device. It's alien technology. But it's not just technology, it's like it's alive. Xander's mind was reeling, but the pull of the device was undeniable. "Eli." Before he could say more, the comms crackled, and Eli's voice came through. "You're close. But you need to understand. The alien lords, they've been using this device to manipulate the fabric of reality. It's a weapon, yes, but it's also a gateway. And if you activate it, you'll open a door to something far worse than the creature hunting you." The words hit Xander like a punch to the gut. A gateway? A weapon? What was this? "Activate it?" Xander's voice faltered, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the device. It was like it was alive, pulsing with energy, and he could feel it pulling at him. "Don't," Eli's voice was insistent now. "It's not just about you anymore. It's about all of us. The universe. This device, it doesn't just change things. It controls them." Xander's hand hovered over the device, his heart pounding. It was a choice he had never thought he'd have to make, and yet here he was, standing on the precipice of something monumental. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the air grew thick with energy. The creature was back, its form appearing at the far end of the chamber. But it wasn't alone. There were others, more creatures, more shadows, moving toward them. "Do it, Xander!" Tess shouted. "We don't have time." The room was closing in, the creatures advancing with terrifying speed. The choice was clear: activate the device, or die trying.